Today we're going to talk about estate planning during a pandemic. My name is Gregory Singleton. I'm an estate planning and probate attorney with Signature Law. Signature Law is an estate planning and probate law firm located in Minneapolis, Minnesota, serving the Twin Cities and Greater Minnesota alike. So, if you like what you see in today's video, please feel free to like and subscribe below. It sure helps support the channel. So, COVID-19. Wow, it has done three things for estate planning, essentially. First, it has increased the number of people doing their estate plans. Secondly, it's made it more difficult for people to do their estate plans when they want to do them. And third, it's made the whole industry get more creative so that people can do their estate plans. Now, historically, the number of Americans that have done their own estate planning has been low, usually less than a third, especially the younger you get. However, with the coronavirus, 32% of young people aged 18 to 34 got a will because of COVID-19. And in fact, 21% of that age group also drew up a will because they either had COVID-19 or knew somebody who had COVID-19. That's kind of scary. In fact, I've had two cases where people have called me up and said, "Hi, I'm dying because of the coronavirus. I need to make a will right away." Now, in both those cases, they were in outstate Minnesota, and I serve outstate Minnesota, but it does take a little bit longer than somebody that I can see in person. So I referred to them to someone that was local. I haven't heard from either of them since. I hope they're okay. But regardless, the numbers are still low in the number of people that have estate plans, and the majority of Americans do not have a will. Now, the coronavirus has made it a lot more difficult to do estate planning during the pandemic. The big challenge in Minnesota is that everything other than a trust, a will, a healthcare directive, and a power of attorney all need to be notarized. And if you have a trust, you still need to have a will for a pour-over will and a healthcare directive and a power of attorney. To do notarization, this essentially requires in-person contact, but we're in a pandemic, so that becomes an issue. In Minnesota, you cannot execute a will by technology, by electronic means. You can't do substantial compliance, and there's no such thing as a holographic will that's acceptable in Minnesota. A holographic will is a handwritten will. In some jurisdictions, you can handwrite your own will, and it's valid. Not in Minnesota. Also, probate is taking longer. A lot of stuff is being done by Zoom, which is great. And we'll talk about how the industry is adapting, and as well as the courts are adapting in a little bit. But probate, there is much more of a backlog. And if you think about it, if you're giving money to someone today in your will, and that person is out of work because of the coronavirus, they need that money faster than ever. So they may not want to wait for probate to be over before they can get that money. Luckily, the estate planning industry has been adapting. And to this, technology is key. Probate hearings are done by Zoom. Other hearings are being done by Zoom. Depositions, not so much an issue in estate planning, but they're being done by Zoom, which I think is crazy, but great. If you think about it, if I go to court, a lot of attorneys, I don't, but a lot of attorneys will bill their time to travel to court, wait in the courtroom, do the hearing, and then travel home. I don't bill for travel time, but some attorneys do. Now, if you do a court hearing by Zoom, all you do is sit in your office or in your kitchen and wear a suit from the waist up, and we can wear shorts below, and you don't have to bill your client for that extra time. So it does save money. Now, everything that I do is remote. I work with a virtual office, meaning I do have office space downtown in case I need conference rooms, but I don't have the big overhead of a huge office downtown that I have to pass on to my client. It's part of my business model. I do most things remotely already. I do my initial consult by phone or by Zoom. My intake forms are done by encrypted documents that I send to the clients. The encryption protects their private information. Documents I draft remotely. If I have questions about it, I'll contact my client by Zoom or phone or by text or email. documents when I'm done and for review, I send them by encrypted Dropbox or portal to my clients. Now, this is how I always operate, and it's become the industry standard for operating during a pandemic. If you do go get your estate plan done, talk to your attorney and make sure that what they're doing is encrypted. They're not just emailing you documents. They're not just having it done in non-encrypted ways, because it's important. This is your personal information. The big challenge in Minnesota is the signing. Now, I serve greater Minnesota, meaning places that are 6 to 8 hour drive away, but I don't make that 8 hour drive away. What I do is I will, once the documents are finally approved, I will mark them up with flags. I will write very specific instructions to the notary, to the witnesses, to the individual that is signing the documents, and I will mail them off after making arrangements with a local law firm or a local bank or somebody that can do the notary service. And they follow those instructions, sign and initial where all the flags are, and send it back to me. I'll scan it, verify that it's all right, put it in a binder, and send it back to them as finalized. That's how I serve greater Minnesota. I can do that for people that are in Minneapolis or in the Twin Cities as well. One of the things you can do in Minnesota is do an electronic notary. The notary technically can be done remotely, and I say technically for a reason. It's got very onerous requirements. You have to register with the state. You have to keep an electronic journal, which you have to keep for 10 years. There's a lot of other things you have to do. I say technically because I haven't met an estate planning attorney or law firm that is doing electronic notary services in Minnesota. So I appreciate that the legislature is trying to help us out, but it really hasn't done what we intended it to do. Instead, we have to get creative. Now, if I'm going to a signing in Minnesota, what I'll do is I'll plan on meeting in a park somewhere. Or I will, my favorite was we met in a parking lot, and I had the people sit in their car. The witnesses sat on the other side of the car, and we passed papers back and forth through a window. Everyone's wearing masks. Everyone has hand sanitizers. You sign, you kind of watch them through the window as witnesses. You can notarize right there and have everything done. A lot of law firms are doing drive-by signings where they put a table outside. There will be a plexiglass window. You can do your signing and stay socially distanced 6 feet apart. Some law firms are even turning their conference rooms into places where you can sign by putting up plexiglass, making sure that there's enough space between. People are getting very creative. The law marches on. The legislature did help us out a bit, in a way. They created what's called the harmless error rule. This is Minnesota specific, and I imagine some other jurisdictions did something similar. But from March 13th, 2020 through February 15th, 2021, and I got to read this here, if a document or writing added upon a document was not executed in compliance with section 524.2-502, which is the statute which has the requirements for executing a will, the document or writing is treated as if it had been executed in compliance with section 524.2-502 if the proponent of the document or writing establishes by clear and convincing evidence that the decedent intended the document or writing to constitute a will, a partial revocation of will, addition to will, or a revival of a formerly revoked will. Now, normally when you execute, it requires 2 witnesses and a notary. You have to have capacity as well, but we'll talk about the notary and the witnesses here. And under the temporary statute, you can probably get away without witnesses or notary, but there are some problems with this statute. First of all, it only applies to wills. It doesn't apply as a power of attorney or healthcare directive. And if we're in a pandemic and you get COVID, you really want to have that healthcare directive in place. That still requires a notary and witnesses. The other problem, or one of the other problems, is you have to prove by clear and convincing evidence that you intended this document to be your will, and which raises the question, what is clear and convincing evidence? Now, we don't know. The courts haven't really addressed this in an appeal yet, so the courts haven't given us an instruction on what a clear and convincing evidence is. Is it very simply you make sure you have a video that says, where you say, this document here is my last will and testament? Do you get other people to watch you? And If you went through all that trouble, why didn't you just get an attorney and a notary and witnesses to do the signing for you? If you didn't get an attorney and a notary and witnesses for the execution, it also raises the issue that you probably signed and wrote, or you probably wrote your will all on your own, which has a whole host of other problems. As you've seen in some other videos, there's a lot of ins and outs and ups and downs to writing a will. And if you write something wrong, you could cause major problems down the road. Your will could be defunct as a document altogether. And again, I do want to stress that we don't know how the courts are going to interpret this law. We don't know what's going to be clear and convincing evidence. We don't know what will be accepted. So you may handwrite your own will and try to do the harmless error rule and rely on that. But in the end, your will may be defunct. So the solution: contact an attorney that is willing to get creative in the signing of the documents, and talk to someone that's got some experience doing this. The whole situation is not ideal, but we're in the middle of a pandemic, and that's just the name of the game. So that's estate planning during a pandemic. If you like what you saw in this video, please feel free to like and subscribe below. It sure helps support the channel. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, until next time, this is Gregory Singleton with Signature Law.